here are 10 clues that prove giants might have once roamed the earth. Footprints. Everyone knows that giant footprints are discovered all over the world, which could only belong to a giant biped. Bigfoot is the obvious example. His alleged footprints have been molded for decades and are still found in abundance. The same occurs with Yeti, the footprints of which cover the Himalayan mountains. These prints can be as long as 24 inches. Both creatures, if proven real, or proven to have previously existed, would be giants by any definition of the word, since a hominid with 24-inch feet could be twice as tall as a fully grown man. Giant footprints like these aren't only contemporary, however, and aren't only connected with undocumented species. Fossilized human footprints are common, and such specimens support the giant hypothesis. For instance, in 2016, several websites reported that a giant imprint that resembled a human foot was found in a piece of granite in China. It was claimed that the footprint measured 22.5 inches long and 8 inches wide. Surprisingly, the piece of granite was dated to 200 million years ago, which is a serious problem, since hominids only began appearing in the fossil record a couple of million years ago. This means that either our entire understanding of evolutionary biology is wrong, or that the story was made up. Since it's hard to make a footprint in solid granite, our decision is easy. Molar. While the existence of a giant species of human is still up for debate, the existence of a giant species of ape has already been proven, but in a very strange way. In 1935, a German paleontologist visited an apothecary shop in Hong Kong. For those of you who don't know, apothecaries were the precursors to pharmacists, people responsible for procuring and dispersing chemicals and herbs for the treatment of illnesses. Chinese apothecaries were, and are, still unique in their use of the parts of rare and often endangered animals. This is what brought the paleontologist into the shop, the search for dragon teeth, which is the colloquial name of fossilized teeth that were a staple of Chinese medicine. The paleontologist didn't leave empty-handed. He found a giant fossilized molar that he immediately distinguished as belonging to an ape. This was the first evidence of the existence of the Gigantopithecus, the largest species of primate ever discovered. They lived from roughly 9 million to 100,000 years ago and stood nearly 10 feet tall, weighing upwards of 1,200 pounds. However, because of the scarcity of fossils, the ape's size is merely speculative. Some scientists believe the estimates are overblown, and the Gigantopithecus stood no more than 6 feet 6 inches tall and weighed 600 pounds. However, this would still make it a giant among most men. Bones. Not all evidence of giant hominids comes from teeth. Though this is most often the case with Gigantopithecus, more substantial fossils have been found, but they've been limited to mandibles. These have been discovered in China, Vietnam, and Thailand, mainly in caves where Gigantopithecus took residence. The absence of fossils from other body parts is why the ape's size is so hard to determine. It could have had a big head and smaller body, making the species not the giant of our dreams that we'd initially hoped. If even Gigantopithecus didn't surpass 6 feet, what hope do we have for finding actual giants? Well, a 2016 discovery may have proven the giant hypothesis, but it's relative to the time. Excavators at a late Neolithic burial site in Shandong Province, China, found several skeletons exceeding 5 feet 9 inches in length. One of these was 6 feet 2 inches long. While this doesn't seem all that miraculous, the gravesite dates to 5,000 years ago, where the average height of humans barely surpassed 5 feet. However, before we start ascribing these remains to a race of giants, scientists have a much simpler answer. The bodies were part of a single wealthy family who reached abnormal heights thanks to great genes and generations of healthy, luxurious living. The Bible. For many people, biblical evidence isn't worth that much, and this is a rational position to take. Most historians can see that the Bible is not an accurate telling of history, and even the parts that get it right are distorted by religious bias and metaphoric liberties. But in the context of this video, the Bible is relevant because it shows that the belief in giants has existed since at least the Old Testament. You probably know at least one giant from the Bible, Big Bad Goliath, whom David defeated with a stone and a sling. But this is only the tip of the iceberg. Giants are mentioned in the Bible many times, including several references to a race of giants called Nephilim, which would have lived approximately 5,000 years ago and were said to have perished in the Great Flood. Evidence for Nephilim's existence is essentially non-existent, however, with most fossil evidence being cases of mistaken identity. What were believed to be bones of giants found in 18th century Albany, New York, were actually those of a mastodon. Mythology. The Bible is far from the only religion to feature giants. Hinduism, Jainism, and Islam all contain text or spoken word narratives that attest to the existence of giants. Mythology, as you know, is also inclusive to the species. Eurasia is particularly steeped in giant mythology. Greek, Roman, and Norse texts depict the existence of giants, as do Armenian and Basque traditions. Most Eurasian cultures have tales of giants playing an important part in the metaphorical makeup of their histories. But this isn't limited to the Old World. Even Native Americans told stories of giants. The giant theme also extends to of fairy tales like Jack and the Beanstalk. One thing about mythology is that it doesn't end. Movies, books, and TV shows are all mythology. So giants are still going strong. Jack the Giant Slayer is just the newest in a line of tales about giants dating back thousands of years. Recorded history. Outside of myth and religion, giants do have a place in the historical record. Even real historical figures have been gigantified by history. Maximinus Thrax, the emperor of Rome from 235 to 238 AD, was reported by historians as being 8 feet 6 inches tall. Confucius was another documented giant at 9 foot 6. Though these measurements are documented as fact, a foot was thought to be smaller than it is today, possibly 8 inches as opposed to 12. If this were the precise conversion, Maximinus and Confucius would be no taller than what we're used to. Other giants in the history books include Orestes, reported by Plutarch to be 10 feet tall, and Gabara, reported by Pliny as being 9 feet 9 inches tall. One fascinating account of real-life giants was by Antonio Pigafetta, the scholar who chronicled Magellan's voyage around the world. Among the measured and accurate reporting, Pigafetta described the discovery of 10-foot giants in South America's Patagonia region. However, subsequent trips by other explorers to Patagonia proved that the giants' heights were exaggerated, and that this tribe of people averaged 6 feet tall. It's clear that history is not infallible either. Tools. Some people point to the discovery of abnormally large tools or weapons as proof of giant activity. Items like hand axes and knives that were too heavy for a regular human are seen as evidence of the creature's existence. But this is a serious stretch. The tools could have been designed for the use of multiple people at once, or they could have broken from a larger machine that performed the action automatically. Or simply, they could be the result of a manufacturer's error. Another early but now discredited theory is that many of the world's ancient monuments were built by giants. This includes Stonehenge, which was long believed to be the work of giants for the sole reason that machinery to move stones of that size did not yet exist. This theory crumbled with the discovery of Neolithic construction techniques that could easily have produced Stonehenge, like the method that built the pyramids. Art. One clear source for the proliferation of giant lore in the last few millennia is their presence in paintings. In fact, a 12th century illustrated poem called Brut depicts a giant helping Merlin build Stonehenge, which certainly helps promote the myth. More prevalent than British drawings with giant imagery is Egyptian art. Giants are one of the most popular subjects in Egyptian pottery and tombs. Of course, as with any art, these depictions shouldn't be assumed factual. Art is all about symbolism, so the exaggerated size of people in the paintings should not be considered realistic. Historians believe that Egyptian giants were drawn in such a way to represent status and power, not real gigantism. It's also thought that the giants could have been depictions of gods. These are all more likely than the paintings being evidence of the existence of true giants, since artistic realism didn't become the norm until the Renaissance period. Robert Wadlow. One clue that giants once roamed the earth is the proven existence of Robert Wadlow. Wadlow was a man who began exhibiting abnormal growth shortly after birth. By kindergarten, he was already 5 feet 4 inches tall. At age 9, he was 6 foot 2, and by the time he was 12, he had reached the 7-foot mark. At high school graduation, Wadlow stood 8 feet 3 inches tall. It was around this time that Wadlow became a celebrity. He toured the country with the Ringling Brothers Circus, and thereafter made public appearances both independently and for corporations, like the International Shoe Company, which sponsored the modern giant and manufactured for him a shoe-sized 37AA. Unfortunately, but not surprisingly, Wadlow suffered many health problems as a result of his condition, and he passed away in 1940 at the age of 22. Just before he passed, Wadlow measured 8 feet 11 inches tall and weighed 490 pounds. Unlike the other alleged giants, Wadlow's life and size had been documented, and the reason for his stupendous stature doesn't appeal to the supernatural. He had a tumor in his pituitary gland, the organ responsible for creating growth hormone. If a giant is simply an abnormally large human, Wadlow certainly qualifies, as do many people who are roaming the earth at this very moment. NBA. Forget the idea of a species of giants, past or present. Let's focus on the real giants of this world. Human beings, by far the tallest species of hominid on Earth. But we know this isn't good enough for you guys, so we need to talk about the tallest of the tall, the top 1% of the species. We're talking about the people who are 6'4". Yes, if you're a male who is 6'4" or over, you are in the top 1% of people in the United States, and are thus effectively a giant. The same goes for women over 5'10". And if you're living in a country with shorter inhabitants, the bar is way lower. You only have to be 5'10" to be considered a giant in Bolivia, and 5'3" if you're a woman. For this reason, people over these heights should be considered extremely rare, which is why the National Basketball Association is such an anomaly. The average NBA player is 6 feet 7 inches tall, a height which only 0.045% of Americans reach. And as you know, the NBA hosts a number of players over 7 feet tall. So many, in fact, that 17% of American 7-footers become NBA players. So, if you want to see giants, real giants, just turn on an NBA game. You don't need pseudoscience or CGI.